following movie is going to show you evidence that the controllers, the powers that shouldn't be, are trying to shut down the free and open internet. They fear the free flow of information between people all over the world that the internet has brought in. Humanity, for the first time in its history, is waking up at a massively rapid pace, and it is picking up every day. The pace is growing faster and faster, and the internet is largely responsible for this awakening, because people who are already awake can share information with others who may not be in the know about certain facts, and because of that, the controllers are afraid, because with the free flow of information and the evolution of humanity, they will eventually become irrelevant. It's going to start off with a warning in 2008 from Professor of Law at Stanford University, Lawrence Lessig, where he gives a warning and speaks about the Internet Patriot Act. And then you're going to hear a broadcast from January 20th, 2012 and May 6th, 2012. White hat hacker Winston Smith give out a warning about false flag hack attacks.
My name is Larry Lessig, and I'm a professor at Stanford. I've been involved a lot in the founding of Creative Commons, which Joey now chairs, and a lot around issues of intellectual property as it relates to this space. The last 10 or 15 years, the great hope was that government would ignore what happened in the context of the internet. And in certain ways it did, in certain ways it didn't, but in certain important ways it did. And the hope was that eventually, when the government kind of woke up, I think many of us kind of imagined, it was bizarre how idiotic we were, but we imagined when the government woke up, they'd actually be intelligent or rational in thinking about how to deal with this new medium. And I think the great fear I have right now is that, for reasons articulated brilliantly in a book by John Zittrain called The Future of the Internet and How to Stop It, we're about 1 or 2 years before the government really wakes up to dealing with what it thinks of as the internet, and there's extraordinary ignorance inside the government about how to do it in a way that continues to foster the very best of what the internet has done. And so, the great work of people like Vid Cerf, or people inside of entities that are trying to educate the government about how to do it right, still in my view hasn't penetrated. And instead it's this old style special interest corruption that is going to guide the way the government goes, and that's going to really screw a whole extraordinary amount of wealth that could be created if we kept true to what the principles of the internet were. The thing that really worries me, though, is again, the intersection with the government around issues about security. So, the 30-second version of the Zittrain story is there's going to be an I-9/11 event, which doesn't mean an Al-Qaeda event. What it means is an event where the instability or the insecurity of the internet becomes manifest, some major malicious event, which then inspires the government into a response. If you remember, after 9/11, the government dropped the Patriot Act within about 20 days, and it was passed. And the Patriot Act's huge. I remember somebody asking a Justice Department official, how did they write such a large statute so quickly? And of course the answer was, it's been sitting in the drawers of the Justice Department for the last 20 years waiting for the event that would allow them to drop it. And of course the Patriot Act is filled with all sorts of insanity about changing the way civil rights are not protected or protected in the United States. So I had dinner once, and Richard Clark was at the table, and I said to him, is there an equivalent? Is there a Patriot Act, an I-Patriot Act, just sitting waiting for some substantial event for them to come in and have an excuse for radically changing the way the internet works? And he said, of course there is. And I swear this is what he said, and quote, Vid Cerf is not going to like it very much. So this is a big terror. Like, they're just sitting waiting for the inevitable to happen, and then slam.
For the last 15 or so years, Hollywood's been pushing certain themes in all hacker-related films. As far back as 15 years ago in the movie Hackers from 1994, you've got that. You've got the whole premise of that movie is a white hat security researcher developed a virus that's going to sink some oil tankers as a distraction for for stealing some money, and then the attack gets blamed on hackers. Then you have Die Hard 4, which is another movie based on infrastructure attacks where hackers are attacking the critical infrastructure of the city. Then you have and then you have movies like Takedown, which is the Miramax picture, which is a fictionalized account of Kevin Mitnick, the hacker from California. And that film, Kevin Mitnick hacks into a white hat security researcher, one of the good guys who worked with the government, and found a proof of concept virus that he wrote, which attacks SCADA systems and attacks industrial, nuclear plants, water lines, that type of thing. And these types of themes are prevalent throughout all these movies. And within the last several years, we've seen these actual white hat, government-funded, corporate proof of concepts tools start to come out for infrastructure attacks. On the most extreme examples are the Stuxnet virus and the Dooku virus, which have already been proven to come from governments and Israeli government and U.S. government sources. And then you'll have at every hacker conference that comes out, you'll have these floods of SCADA attack tools developed by not by black hat hackers, but by white hat security professionals who work for vulnerability firms, and they're simply developed and simply interested in getting their name out there and finding the latest vulnerabilities in these SCADA systems, because that's the latest buzzword around the information security system is SCADA protection and critical infrastructure protection. But all this is leading to is there's going to be a large-scale attack on SCADA systems, which will be false flagged by the New World Order, and it will be used, and they will end up doing exactly what the films had said they were going to do, and they're going to end up blaming hackers and throwing the anonymous matter on the attack. So when a large-scale SCADA attack does happen, don't look to basement-dwelling anonymous people. Look towards white hat security professionals and their government contracting firms who are developing it and speaking at conferences about these attacks, because they're the ones who are spending the profit from patching the vulnerabilities and implementing the solutions for it. For a long time, the critical infrastructure aspects of society, like the nuclear power plants and the dams and the sewer pipelines and all that stuff, all those things used to never be internet connected. It's considered crazy. You don't consider making that a public-facing infrastructure. But as everything starts being given IP addresses, even now washing machines are being given IP addresses, things end up on the internet. And even if a single outside machine can get compromised and sucked into this eternal network, then it is possible to worm through and get control of it. Especially considering a lot of these SCADA systems are ridiculously simple, using programming languages and architectures from 20 years ago. And the reason is they were never meant to be internet facing, but they are now. And there's going to be an attack on them, and it's going to be backed by the government so that they can use it to continue to implement controls and restrict internet freedoms, get things like SOPA and PIPA and all sorts of other restrictive internet legislations passed under the guise of protecting society from these critical infrastructure attacks by these wily groups of hackers. People in the hacker community and the information security community in general, they should really just follow the news and follow developments on SCADA vulnerabilities that are being released and discovered, and who's the one discovering them? What are they? What's the purpose of it? A lot of it is just legitimate researchers trying to make a name off of a hot topic, make a name for themselves off finding vulns in a system that's very popular to do right now. They can make a lot of money finding vulnerabilities and then getting contracts for the companies. There's nothing wrong with that. But what is the problem is once those vulnerabilities are indexed and cataloged, the government will pick and choose which ones they want to do. Put together a black ops team to carry it out, and then blame it on a group like Anonymous.
Yeah, and then some 14 or 15-year-old kid will be the patsy.
The Bin Laden of the internet.
Yeah, and they'll make them go down in history as the bad guy when in reality it's not. It's unbelievable what's going on. 10 years ago, if you had told me this kind of stuff was going to happen, I would tell you that you were You've watched too many. You've watched The Matrix one too many times, perhaps.
Yeah, it's the same thing like with the Lone Gunman TV show regarding 9/11. There are all sorts of Hollywood movies.
Predictive programming is what you're referring to. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. It's they'll have topics in films and mainstream media, and mainstream film movies and TV shows about things like the Twin Towers getting blown up or planes getting hijacked and crashed into them years before 9/11. And so basically they're all they're going off these war game scenarios that have been developed, and SCADA attacks are one of the most popular war game scenarios right now for the federal government.
Those in the hacker community that hear this live broadcast or later on, you pull the archive or you hear it on YouTube, guys, whatever senses you use to work and do your magic, keep an eye out on what's going on, because you guys will be what saves the day. It's going to be you people that help save the internet, okay? So keep your eyes open. Give out your warning one more time, just in case.
Yeah, the main warning is to keep an eye out on SCADA system vulnerability publications. Keep an eye on who's releasing them, what type of vulnerabilities there are, what type of systems there are, and just and keep an eye out for government war game scenarios. They always advertise these types of scenarios when they're going to make them, when they're going to make a big thing of it. A lot of it goes unadvertised. And if you're working within government, keep an eye out for those red team, blue team type exercises. And eventually one of those might one of those contractors that are being brought in might have an agreement with some darker forces to be able to marshal some stuff in. So everyone has to be on their top diligence, not really and mostly looking towards the inside, looking at the contractors and the intelligence connections of those involved in your research.
Now, you warned about the SCADA system attacks that they would launch. When I say they, I mean this, whatever you want to call them, this elitist group that control things. They would either have contractors do it or the government itself, an agency in the government itself do it, and then they could blame Anonymous or they could blame, a foreign country, whatever. In this case, a couple months ago, it looked like they would have blamed Anonymous. Now it looks like they're aiming that weapon of mass deception at Iran. And you see them talking about how, Iran could, hack our infrastructure and take down power stations and everything else. So you know better than me about infrastructure and how that's such crap. So go ahead, I'll give you the floor. Explain to the listeners how that whole thing with the attacking Iran thing is crap, and go ahead and you can gloat if you want that you called it and said that they were going to try this.
They're basically following the playbook that they've laid out that we discussed on the last couple times I was on. They're gearing up to do a false flag attack against the SCADA systems in the United States. And for new listeners, SCADA systems are the automated controllers that are in charge of things like water systems, nuclear power plants, electrical grids, the critical infrastructure. And a lot of the technology is 20, 30 years old, and it shouldn't be put on the internet. But a lot of it, a lot of stuff that they have been updated has been put online. Some of the attacks that are coming through that are being developed now are against these old systems in order to attack critical infrastructure. And the only real motivation that a hacker would want to take over these systems for is to do some kind of damage to the infrastructure, and the only people who would really benefit from that are either foreign countries that are seeking to attack, or from the government itself that's seeking to do some kind of false flag attack. And that seems to be where they're going. Using groups like Anonymous as a proxy or as a front. They're seeking to do attacks on the United States and blame it on countries like Iran. And you can see in the recent news reports that that's exactly where they're heading. They can dovetail Anonymous into the mix by saying Anonymous was assisting topple regimes during the Arab Spring and all that stuff. And those are the anonymous participation in the Arab Spring Revolution has been confirmed a State Department false flag operation. There are chat logs on Facebook that reveal basically admissions of such, and that seems to be where it's heading now. And what you can start to see in mainstream news reports that the government is warning of attacks against critical infrastructure, specifically on the SCADA systems from rogue enemies such as Iran or things like terrorist groups like Al Qaeda seeking to attack critical infrastructure by attacking our SCADA systems. And that basically just means they're starting to war game these scenarios and to develop attacks of themselves. And then once they're able to pull something major, they're going to use that to pass legislation and restrict the internet even further. It seems like the one major thing they need to get these restrictive legislations passed is some kind of internet, like some kind of catalyst online that will get people behind it, just like the Project for New American Century said they need a new Pearl Harbor in order to go into the Middle East, and they engineered 9/11 in order to pass this, but they're going to need some kind of internet Pearl Harbor, and they're working on doing that with the SCADA attacks.
And it looks like they're going to try to pinpoint it on Iran so they could get a 1-2 punch. That would, knowing them, because they never do things, on just to benefit on one level. If anybody wonders why they would blame Iran, well, it's a 1-2 punch. One, they can bring in this legislation to quote-unquote protect the internet, because it's always about our protection. And they can declare war on Iran.
An act of war.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'd be able to dub this cyber offensive as an act of war.
The Pentagon already said they would react to a cyber attack with real bombs.
That's where they're going with it. And it's becoming more and more apparent as time goes on through mainstream media press releases, because there's more and more coverage on things like scary Arab countries or scary Persian countries attacking our critical infrastructure using SCADA vulnerabilities and things like anonymous, working to either topple or prop up regimes in the area when it's all just being puppeted from a blue State Department.
What do you guys, the hacker community, think about all this? What's the chatter?
Among the right, among the people who know what's going on and are informed about the New World Order and the big picture, the chatter is that it's pretty much, everyone pretty much agrees that this is where they're going with it, and everyone's kind of has their eyes open for it.
Kind of frame it for the listeners a little bit, and kind of give them, in like 30 seconds, tell them what it's about, and then I'll play the audio so they can get an idea.
Well, the new Call of Duty video game being released by Activision has a trailer that's been released onto YouTube, and the trailer stars Oliver North, as well as a couple game developers and a Special Forces major. And they're discussing the Call of Duty Black Ops 2 game that's about to be released, specifically Chapter 4 of the game, where it's called The Enemy. The chapter of that game is entitled The Enemy Has the Keys. And the trailer of the game features Oliver North discussing at length his nightmare scenario of a group of hackers being able to commandeer and take over the command and control center for drones, and being able to use the drones against American troops and civilian populations. And they say things like, if you can hack a bank, you can hack a drone. And as they're saying these things, they're showing images of Guy Fawkes masks and anonymous imagery and icons, using indicating that is where Anonymous is going to be going with their next attacks. And there's been an outcry from Anonymous against Activision, and they're getting attacks against Activision now because of the light that they're portraying them. And that's where that's going. So go ahead and play the audio of Oliver North giving the rundown. Of course, everyone knows Oliver North is the coke dealer from the Iran-Contra scandal.
You want to know what the war of the future is going to look like? I don't think the average American grasps how violent war is about to become.
The next few years are going to...
They show a rail gun.
See a wide array of technology that allows you to blow things up.
P.W. Singer, quote-unquote future war expert and author, Wired for War. He's been featured on the History Channel show about I can't remember. I think it's called it was That's Incredible or That's Impossible or something. It only ran for one season and they axed it, but. Interesting that he's in this. And it's all, I see what you mean, Winston, dramatic lighting effects and everything else. Ugh, mind control.
To kill in a way we've never seen before in history. A lot of these will sound like things out of science fiction. Things like directed energy, which is basically lasers made real.
Oh, directed energy weapons. Oh, like scalar technology too? Oh, like HARP.
Exoskeletons, camouflage thought of an entirely new way. They're getting smarter. The weapon itself is becoming more independent. What happens next?
There's going to come a time when this technology is going to catch up with us. I have a nightmare scenario that a hacker breaks into our system that controls satellites, UAVs, even the launch of missiles. Consider what it would be like to have friendly fire from U.S. weapons overhead.
That was complete predictive programming, by the way.
The disconnect between how fast
I'll explain that in a minute.
technology is coming and our reaction time, the distance between those two is growing. Some of the most advanced technologies are not just going to be in the hands of the big boys anymore. What if terrorists could get their hands on this?
There is no longer a defined battle space. The enemy could be anywhere, and it could be anyone. I don't worry about a guy that wants to hijack a plane.
Wow, that was complete. I have to stop it there because it's right at the end. Wow, that was complete. Holy crap, right at the end. It could be anyone, and it flashes to that picture of from Anonymous they use in their videos where it's the Anonymous mask, and the person, whoever is wearing the mask, is wearing a hoodie. And it hesitates on that picture for a second as it says anyone, and then for a couple seconds afterwards. That is complete predictive programming. And what I said about him going, imagine drones, friendly fire here inside the United States. Yeah, that's them letting you know that they are going to use this technology against us. 30,000 drones in the next 5 years in the skies. Okay? Yeah, that's awesome. What say you, Winston?
Yeah, it's another example of how they're just flaunting it in everyone's face and preparing people so that once it does go down, nobody's surprised. Because I think one of the things that we explained earlier when one of the main reasons they haven't pulled off a big SCADA attack is because the average American will be like, well, what's an Anonymous? What is this? You know, they know what hackers are, but not everybody knows what Anonymous is, and putting it in things like video games that everyone's kid plays, that's a way to force it into the mainstream culture even more than it is, because the mainstream media coverage hasn't been enough. So now they need to iconify things into the public consciousness, and by putting it into blockbuster video games that everyone's going to be playing and everyone's going to be buying for Christmas gifts and giving to their kids. That's going to instill the right mindset for people, so that once they do pull the big attack, everyone was ready for it and was expecting it and will follow the leader from there on out.
Yeah, and you'll hear people say, "Oh my God, it's like a video game."
It's just like a video game, yeah. Just like 9/11 was just like a Hollywood movie.
You know, it's pretty hard for a 6'6" Arab on dialysis in a cave to pull that off by himself with his laptop and his satellite phone, but apparently he did. Just like it's going to be pretty hard for a bunch of 14-year-old kids sitting in college dorms to do what they're alleging is going to be done with Anonymous. Yeah, and some poor super smart kid over at MIT or something will end up taking the fall, and they'll say, "Oh, he was sympathetic to Iran," and then they'll tie it to Iran and 9/11, and the next thing you know, we'll be carpet bombing Tehran. Yeah, and the proxy servers that hackers are bouncing out of. That's another thing. That'll be in Russia, so we'll have to bomb Russia over that.
Yeah. So like and that's a serious consideration though. People are asking like, oh, well, how do you stop hack attacks? You know, hackers are using proxies and so on and so forth, and bulletproof servers, and the ISPs that are protected by corrupt governments. How do we deal with that? And the military response is, well, you find out the location of the data center and you bomb it.
Yeah, and as we all know, a lot of these proxy servers are in Russia, so that would just be another thing that they could use to start World War III right there. Yeah.
Russia and China.
Russia, we had to bomb your stuff because terrorists were, and by the way,
and China as well.
Yeah, and by the way, you do realize that Russia just told NATO that they would preemptively strike their missile defense shield, because the mainstream media is constantly going to blame Anonymous as this horrible, horrific entity that goes around doing bad things. Like, I laugh when they freak out. The CIA's website was taken down. Yeah, due to a DDoS attack. The CIA's website, CIA.gov. Do you really think they have national security secrets on CIA.gov? If you do, you need to stop drinking the Kool-Aid right now, because it has completely affected you. 150%. There is nothing of value on CIA.gov. Okay? Nothing. It's a bigger tragedy if the E! Entertainment News Network got taken down due to a DDoS attack. And that's how useless CIA.gov is when it comes to national security issues. Same thing with FBI.gov or any. Those are just informational sites. And they play this up so that Anonymous looks like, some boogeyman, which, like Winston said, they'll just use to blame.
There's also a lot of integration with Anonymous and the U.S. State Department. It's not really officially admitted, but when there are a bunch of chat logs on Pastebin from the AnonOps IRC network that discuss different informant groups like Backtrace Security and a few others and there's discussions between what appear to be FBI agents and State Department officials discussing networks of informants on Anonymous, and they're aside from those campaigns, a lot of the campaigns that they're coming out with are pretty much just fakes being put out by these provocateurs. Like they recently had Operation Global Blackout, which was supposedly going to attack the DNS servers of the internet, and that turned to be absolutely nothing.
So who's left doing all these AnonOps then? Is half of that is fake, and then but I know AnonOps itself that's the real board, right? The message board.
Right. But anyone can join. So like anyone can sign on to there and start a campaign up. And a lot of the most recent campaigns that have been getting a lot of press attention have been fakes. Some of the real stuff that's been going on, you have the Russian anonymous hacking groups. They're starting to target Russian government websites and Vladimir Putin. And I don't know if those are actual Russian who are members of Anonymous. The media is saying that they're Russian activists, but Russian hackers don't usually attack Russian websites. It's kind of just part of their culture that they don't do that. They usually only attack foreign websites, a lot like Chinese hackers. So it's most likely Anons who are either sympathetic towards the Russian people, or this is another State Department false flag where they're going after Russian intelligence services and branding it as anonymous. And that sounds more like it. So that seems to be going on there.
And that happens a lot, right? Where the State Department's going, doing these false flag attacks, and it's really the State Department doing it.
Yeah, it happened all through the Arab Spring, and now if you go to Google News right now and type anonymous hacker, the top two stories are the quote unquote Russian anonymous groups targeting Russian government websites of Vladimir Putin, which on the surface looks very much like a false flag from our side, because Russian hackers do not attack Russian websites. That's why they're able to operate the way they operate, because they know it's a hands-off deal. They won't get bothered if they follow the rules. And the second. The second link is a hacker from Anonymous is claiming to have leaked the VMware ESX hypervisor source code, which is a virtualization engine, and the source code for it was obtained off a Chinese military contractor's computer, because that's another campaign that Anonymous has been going on the last few weeks. A guy named Hardcore Charlie has been attacking Chinese military contractors and leaking all their passwords and data. And again, who benefits from attacking Chinese servers? Anonymous is going after attacking Arab governments, Persian governments, Russian governments, and Chinese governments. This does not really sound like the Anonymous of yore. This sounds like an arm of the State Department, and that's where all their campaigns are going. Especially since the original players are all dodging indictments right now. So guess who's running the servers?
And that's probably how they got in, was through catching these guys and then exploiting them. Because if these guys are doing plea bargains, I'm sure part of the plea bargain was to open their mouth and tell them something.
Oh, yeah. That's usually, and there's an entire network of informants and snitches within the Anonymous and within the hacking community, and just like there's different niches within the hacking community. You've got the people who are into wireless hacking, you've got the people who are into web application hacking, you've got the people who are into hardware hacking, you've got the people who are into snitching and social engineering, and they're usually work with they're either direct FBI informants or they're third party informants. The actual FBI agency parlance form is hip pockets, where they'll have one paid informant, and that informant will have some sources that they'll relay the information to their associate from. And there's entire networks of there's entire groups of hackers and snitches that operate like that, and they're paid for it, and they go to DEF CON, they go to all the other hacker conferences, and they're all scumbags, and they have a very, very heavy presence on non-ops.
Let's begin with a story that has been developing just over the last few hours. The largest domain server on the internet, GoDaddy.com, was taken down today, shutting down thousands and potentially millions of websites. Now, the Twitter user @Anonymous03R wrote, "The attack is not coming from Anonymous Collective. The attack is coming only from me," and went on to say that the action is being carried out to test how the cybersecurity is safe and for more reasons that I cannot talk now. All right. Well, we want to talk about it now with RT web producer Andrew Blake. And Andrew, I know there's a whole lot of things that we really don't know at this point.
No, we really don't know next to nothing. But we can speculate and we can talk.
We know?
Okay, I shouldn't say we're going to speculate because we know some things. We know a couple hours ago, GoDaddy disappeared. The website went offline. A bunch of the websites that are hosted through GoDaddy, the largest domain registrar on the internet. They have something like 8 million different user accounts. A bunch of their sites, a bunch of their emails just, bam, disappeared. And actually, GoDaddy's come out maybe 2 or 3 times in the last few hours just to say, hey, we're working on it, hold tight. They haven't actually gone on the record to say what happened. The only person who is taking credit is this one person, this anonymous. We have to bring you up to date on your leet speak. That's anonymous owner. There was a 3.
That's a 3.
Yeah. It's
a backwards E.
Yeah, those nerds. That's how they get you.
Okay.
So we have this one person who's taking credit for it. Did they do it? We don't know. They're saying they are. We can believe them. It's really
tough when we talk about Anonymous,
especially because we don't know anything. We don't know IDs. We don't know identities. We don't know pictures. We don't know locations. I'm sure that this has gotten enough attention from around the world in the last few hours that the feds are already on the way to whoever has this account set up. So we don't know if this person actually did do it, but it is possible, and there could be reasons behind it. They're very good ones, too. Last year, if you remember, the Stop Online Piracy Act, or SOPA, was a big deal, and that almost passed the House and the Senate, and it almost got signed into law, and had SOPA passed, the internet, as we know, would be completely different right now. So originally, GoDaddy, keep in mind, there are millions upon millions upon millions of users.
And some of these users are just average people who maybe launch their business or, use it for their businesses, small businesses that they run out of their homes.
Yeah, and they're all screwed right now, but we can get to that. But so last year, GoDaddy went out there and they said, okay, well, we support SOPA. Well, why not? It's going to be good. And
I did not know that.
Yeah, people didn't really like that when they said that. So if you remember, there was a big blackout on Reddit and on Wikipedia. GoDaddy, it kind of took them a little bit longer to change their stance. But in the meantime, they lost several thousand of their users. People orchestrated just a switchover and just said goodbye to GoDaddy. GoDaddy actually had to come out and say, all right, guys, we changed our mind. We agree with some of SOPA, but no, we're going to say that we're anti-SOPA. And it was too late, and it cost them a lot of accounts. So, we have this anonymous owner guy who's saying that he took credit for it, and he's trying to test out the cybersecurity, which kind of brings us up to something that's happening just the last couple of days. On Friday, it was reported that the White House is drafting an executive order that they might have to put out there if the Senate and Congress can't come to terms with a new cybersecurity legislation. We know that there's a thing called CISPA that was up for a vote a few months ago. And the Senate and the House, however, haven't been able to actually agree on like a concise cybersecurity legislation.
And we see similar pieces of legislation being passed or at least taken up in other countries as well.
And things like CISPA, when it was first being brought up a few months ago, people were saying, oh, this is just SOPA back from the dead. Now, we don't know if GoDaddy supports CISPA. In fact, they really haven't said anything. There's one statement, if you dig up online a few months back, someone from GoDaddy says, we don't know. We're unsure. So we do know that the White House, however, is planning on launching their own kind of cybersecurity legislation.
And when's that supposed to happen?
Well, the news broke on Friday. The White House could do it whenever. And if we know anything about President Obama's executive orders, it'll probably be signed in the middle of the night, and no one will know until it's too late.
So we're connecting some dots here, of course. The fact that GoDaddy at one time supported SOPA did go back on that decision, but it took a while.
Yeah. The point is, there's reason to believe that people don't like GoDaddy for legitimate excuses.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about Anonymous, because this anonymous owner, not owned 3R.
So you're learning, all right.
I'm learning. Is apparently a member of Anonymous. But when we talk, and I want to talk more broadly about this because this could happen in the future. Random, so-called members of Anonymous could start launching attacks on websites of their choices that the rest of the collective doesn't agree with. I mean, how does this work in the future with Anonymous?
I don't know. I mean, it's worked so far, maybe not to the successful degree that you would hope for, but Anonymous has been out there, since at least 2008 and, carried out a bunch of operations. Not everyone who participates under the umbrella agrees with their exact motives and their reasons and what they've done, but it's happened before. There was actually a case a few years ago where someone took credit for the big blockade and attack when PayPal blocked distributions to WikiLeaks. Someone actually took credit for that, lied, had nothing to do with it, and they were arrested and thrown in jail. And eventually the feds realized, that's not the right person.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting because there's not a democratic system here in which Anonymous takes votes on what to launch attacks on.
Yeah. So we need to be clear. We don't know that this was a anonymous operation. Anonymous being the collective group. We know that someone claiming to be a member of Anonymous is taking credit, and hopefully within the next few hours, either this person or GoDaddy will actually come out with a legitimate statement and explain what the hell happened. Because right now we think could have been a DDoS attack, could have been SQL injection, JavaScript injection.
Distributed denial of service attack, DDoS.
You're learning so quickly. Wow.
I'm getting it. So that's what I kind of understood happened here, but we still don't know that either.
Something happened. The DNS servers at GoDaddy went down. How that happened, if someone orchestrated a bunch of botnets to attack them, if someone is just really, really, really smart, or maybe someone joked online, maybe someone just tripped over an Ethernet cable at GoDaddy.
Hello, citizens of the world, we are Anonymous. Dear brothers and sisters, now is the time to open your eyes and expose the truth. It has come to our attention that GoDaddy, an internet domain registrar and web hosting company, has gained the attention of Anonymous and the world yesterday as it was experiencing intermittent outages. As silly as it seems, many members of Anonymous are still puzzled whether it was truly an anonymous member or a government entity is still unknown.
Hackers hitting the U.S. water treatment system, or so we've been told. That's right, the mainstream media is reporting that an Illinois water treatment facility was struck by a hacker from Russia who managed to hack in and then rapidly start and stop the pump over and over again until the pump failed. And this pump was supposed to be providing water to thousands of homes. Now, the BBC covered this story with the conventional viewpoint, but we have some questions about this here on InfoWars Nightly News. Let's see. MSNBC has the story, Washington Post reported, quote, news of the incident became public after Joe Weiss, an industry security expert, obtained a report dated November 10th and collected by an Illinois State Intelligence Center that monitors security threats. The original source of the information was unknown and impossible to immediately verify. Well, so that raised some questions among the researchers here at InfoWars, who began to look into the situation further, and they found that there are more questions than answers on this issue. In fact, in Security News Daily, a story reveals that there's a huge gap in this explanation. In fact, Amber Sabin is the Public Information Officer for City Water, Light, and Power in Illinois. That's the municipal electric and water utility for Springfield, Illinois. Responding to a call identifying this organization as the site of the failed pump and possible cyber attack, Sabin told Security News Daily that media reports have wrongly identified her agency. "We were not under cyber attack," Sabin told Security News Daily. Quote, "We've been identified as the utility by mistake. It's not City Water, Light, and Power." Well, so do they have the wrong organization? Or is this just another pretext to pass more cybersecurity laws that will track you on the internet even more than you're being tracked today?
The government has known for several years that China and Russia and other countries have created offensive cyber war units and have penetrated American networks, including the electric power grid, which is pretty easy to penetrate. And that allows them in a time of war or a time of crisis to go in and shut off the electric power and to actually destroy generators throughout the United States. Congress has been informed about this. The Obama administration has been informed about this as well.
But what does this say to us about the Chinese in particular? Because there was another story in the New York Times recently that said the Chinese were subsidizing hackers to go into 103 countries, 1,300 computers, hack into them. What does it say about the Chinese and their adversarial relationship with the rest of the world?
Well, I wouldn't be sure that the Chinese are the only ones. I wouldn't be sure that the United States isn't doing the same sort of thing. Modern countries are creating cyber offensive warfare units. The thing is that you also have to do the defense. And the Obama administration, although it's been informed about this, has yet to make the necessary decisions to create a defense for our electric power grids and other vital systems. Congress is considering a bill by Senator Rockefeller, but the Obama administration yet hasn't made a decision.
So it can be prevented, and can you do anything about these little electronic time bombs already planted?
Well, one thing you can do is disconnect the power grid control system from the internet. There's no reason for it to be connected. It would cost a lot of money to do that, but it also costs a lot of money if one day we woke up and we didn't have electric power.
Chinese hackers breaching a White House computer. No harm done, the White House says, and no classified information compromised, it insists. We're going to have a lot more on all of this with Ed Henry at the White House, but the very fact the Chinese hackers got as far as they did has security experts worried. Make that very worried. For 2 years now, it has been an open secret that China's been phishing, as they call it, U.S. corporate secrets. Security types noting this takes it to a whole new level, and again, a much more worrisome level. Gordon Chang is an expert on all things China and says this latest attack doesn't only prove how brazen the Chinese are, but how unprepared we are. Good to see you, my friend. Hacking a computer isn't rocket science. Getting to the level of the White House is noteworthy.
Yes, and also they went into the White House military office that is the one responsible for keeping America's nuclear launch codes. You know, if they could compromise those, we'd be in a real world of hurt.
Well, what made this worrisome to you?
Well, it is because of the nuclear launch codes. It is because this is the president. You know, the president's travel arrangements, his communications when he's on Air Force One. This is the office that is responsible for making sure he stays in touch with the American military. And that means our security.
Now, a lot of security experts also tell me, Gordon, at best what they did is interrupt the system, hack into it without necessarily disrupting it. In other words, without getting codes, without getting the president's schedule, just enough to, like if someone sent you a virus-plagued email, you touch it and open it, your computer goes down.
Yeah, well,
still bad, you know.
That's what they think today, but they really won't know for quite some time, if ever, how far the Chinese really gotten, because the Chinese have shown in other attacks that they have been able to get in and out and not be detected for quite some time afterwards.
Beacon is saying that The Chinese government is trying to hack our cyber infrastructure. According to the report, hackers linked to China's government broke into one of the U.S. government's most sensitive computer networks, breaching a system used by the White House Military Office for Nuclear Commands, according to defense and intelligence officials familiar with the incident. One official said the cyber breach was one of Beijing's most brazen cyber attacks against the United States and highlights a failure of the Obama administration to press China on its persistent cyber attacks. Now, we don't know if China was trying to do this or not. It seems extremely odd that the Chinese government would try to do this when the U.S. is a superpower and when we owe them a lot of money. And obviously, this would be an attack of aggression if they were to do this. This would be an act of war if they were, in fact, trying to do this. So this is what our U.S. officials are claiming has occurred. However, sadly, they can't be trusted because, as we reported in previous weeks, independent sources, software company Kaspersky and Symantec, said that the U.S. government was trying to infiltrate the Lebanese government and the Iranian government's networks. So here you have the United States saying that we need to pass cyber legislation because another government could do this to us, and yet you've got the company Kaspersky and Symantec saying that the U.S. government tried to penetrate the Iranian government and the Lebanese government's cyber network. So there's great hypocrisy, but more than anything, this is being done, in my estimation, to get cyber legislation bills passed so that ultimately the internet could be regulated. In another article posted today on Infowars.com by Eric Blair, the headline reads, "Cyber attack on U.S. banks is an obvious false flag." This is all occurring at one time. First, they're saying China tried to infiltrate our networks. Now there's a lot of media outlets, including ABC, that are saying we have to watch our cyber networks because Al-Qaeda could infiltrate our banking system. So they're trying to scare us with our finances. This is all an attempt to ultimately regulate the internet. So you could expect to see these reports continuing to come out, these false flag threats that are occurring. President Obama has tried to go through Congress to get cyber legislation passed, but he has failed repeatedly. And that's because the American people do not want the internet to be regulated.
Cyber warfare, the most extensive attack on American banks ever, launched from the Middle East, happening right now. Citigroup, JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, U.S. Bancorp, and today PNC. America's biggest banks, with millions of American families locked out of their accounts online. So what does it mean for your money? Who's behind it? How long has it been happening? Officials across the government are tracking the attacks, working to keep them from becoming financial nightmares. ABC senior justice correspondent Pierre Thomas starts us off.
Tonight, the financial and banking industry is on high alert as a massive cyber attack remains underway. Potentially millions of customers trying to bank online this week blocked. Among the targets, Bank of America, PNC, and Wells Fargo.
There is an elevated level of threat. The threat is now high.
Sources tell ABC News it's a denial of service attack, where hackers from the Middle East have secretly commandeered thousands of computers worldwide. Those computers, or zombies, have overwhelmed bank websites with a barrage of electronic traffic. Different banks have been targeted on different days. Today it was PNC's turn.
We tried for 3 hours to get on PNC's website, but we couldn't get through.
On Facebook today, frustrated customers. Cynthia Shrim wrote, "Trying to pay bills. This is ridiculous." Stacey Briggs Gerlach posted, "Hopefully it can be up soon. Never realized how dependent I am on it." A group of hackers calling themselves Izzadeen al-Qassam warned the financial industry it was going to attack in retaliation for that controversial film that sparked outrage in the Muslim world. The scary thing is that even with the warning, the attack could not be stopped.
The threats are getting increasingly sophisticated.
The U.S. suspects hackers in Iran may be involved.
This is the first time that we know about where a Middle Eastern entity, perhaps a Middle Eastern government, has attacked websites of critical infrastructure in the United States.
The hackers have not been able to steal any money in these attacks or disrupt financial markets, but authorities fear the next generation of wide-scale cyber assaults could be far more devastating.
And if they get inside the banks, they can move money around and cause financial chaos.
So, Pierre, the hackers are blanketing the banks with these attacks right now. But to reiterate the bottom line, so far, everyone's money is safe.
That's right, George. To be clear, no money has been stolen yet, but many people trying to bank online could not for a time get access to their accounts. You can see how that could make it difficult for a small business. So that's why tonight the government is working so hard to locate and block those ongoing attacks.
Well, if there was any doubt that an executive order on cybersecurity was right around the corner, now might be the time to cast it aside. According to a series named and unnamed officials, now more than ever, extra protection is needed to guard against hackers who want to find out our secrets and gain access to our most sensitive information, especially when the perpetrators are from China. That's according to an article in the conservative Washington Free Beacon. It says hackers linked to China's government broke into one of the U.S. government's most sensitive computer networks, breaching a system used by the White House Military Office for nuclear commands. The article goes on to quote a White House official who said that this was a spear phishing attack against an unclassified network. So I want to talk about what all this means, kind of break it down for you, how severe it is, and what it could mean on a larger scale. And for that, I'm joined by RT web producer Andrew Blake.
Christine Frizell.
Andrew, let's start with spear phishing. What does this mean? What can it do?
I mean, it can do anything, but it's kind of a whole lot of nothing, if you ask me. This story came out yesterday, like I said, in was it the Beagle, the Beacon?
The Washington Free Beacon.
The Washington Free Beacon, which a lot of us in the office went, what is that?
Bill Gertz, I believe, was
Yes. And so we started digging around who used to work for the Washington Times and might actually still be employed there. But so we start going through and trying to find out what's this big scare that we see today. Because within hours, it starts, it hits HuffPo, the AP puts it on the wire, and then we start seeing news sources come in saying new things. And the White House did confirm and say, yes, we were hit by a cyber attack, or at least it attempted to be hit by a cyber attack, which sounds really scary. That word itself, attack, it's a little aggressive, a little aggro. But spear phishing. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
It's not really that scary. Like I said, it can do a lot, but there was no crazy Chinese scientists trying to infiltrate our internet tubes and working in vast machines, typing codes, trying to scare us. What spear phishing is someone goes, I wanna get the White House. I'm gonna find someone from the White House. And they'll go and they'll send emails to anyone they can from the White House. And they'll try to make these emails look clever. And they'll say, oh, hi, I'm gonna need your help. Can I have your password? I mean, obviously you can be a bit more complex than that, but you want to try to trick someone into thinking that you're somebody else. It's pretty much just social engineering. It's more of hacking the brain than it actually is hacking a computer. You just want to convince someone to let up their guard, and then maybe if you convince them to open some sort of corrupted PDF file or some sort of other program, then you can unleash whatever you want onto the system.
Yeah, and I would think that anyone that works for the White House, whether it's someone in the intelligence community or even somebody on the custodial staff, anyone with a White House email, I cannot imagine that they would be clicking on these links.
Yeah.
A lot of times, when these emails are sent to me, I often see them in my junk mailbox.
Yeah, exactly. It's like pretty much the same thing as like the old Nigerian oil prince scam or something like that. In fact, Fox picked up the story this afternoon and, fear-mongered the hell out of it instantly, but actually put a quote in there with someone saying, like, what did this come down to? Someone opened an email. And that was it. There was no
it wasn't some crazy hacking into the system.
Yeah, Chinese spies didn't break through like the West Wing windows and start like smashing stuff and putting little USB drives inside like the president's phone. No, I mean they could have, but
right.
Yeah.
But the fact that it was sort of the department that's in charge of White House scheduling, that knows where the president's going to be at all times. This was cause for a whole lot of people to say we need cybersecurity legislation now.
And that's so funny because they've been saying that for so long, and it seems like they've been continuously looking for a new excuse to convince us that that's a good idea.
So you're connecting some dots here. You're saying that the only reason this story came out is perhaps because it was another reason to put in sort of the arsenal of reasons.
I don't want to say that per se.
Okay.
It seems like it would be a bit facetious of me just to assume things like this.
Right.
However, Congress couldn't come up with a cybersecurity bill. The Senate and the House couldn't agree on anything. The White House said, oh, we'll take care of it then. The White House confirmed that they drafted an executive order, and the White House said that they will release an executive order. And all they've needed to do is pretty much scare America into thinking that a cybersecurity threat, which is a threat, it is real, but this maybe, it got a little blown up today. I think we're a little just scared. We're all on Monday.
Are you scared?
No, I'm not scared at all. I'm not scared of anything. But it's Monday. We're all on edge.
But Andrew, let me read you a quote from this article. It said, quote, this is the most sensitive office in the U.S. government, a former senior U.S. intelligence official said. A compromise there would cause grave strategic damage to the United States.
Yet someone just opened up an email. I don't believe that for a second. I'm sure there's some people at the Pentagon that are pretty pissed that apparently they aren't have high clearance as this guy.
There's something else we have to talk about
Absolutely.
with this, something that a lot of times is ignored. Cybersecurity, once the executive order especially is handed down, this is going to create an entirely new infrastructure in this country and around the world. It's going to create a whole lot of business, which could be good for jobs, but there's going to be a lot of people who want these contracts.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, so this is turning into something that seems to be a financial blessing for a lot of people as well.
I believe it was actually Senator Wyden or Senator Udall, excuse me, I don't remember which one, but when they were raising objections to the CISPA bill earlier this year, before that was defeated, they actually, one of them, excuse me, I forget who, actually said, you know, this is going to create a cyber intelligence complex. This is going to be like the military war machine that we're pumping all this money in and just making all of Northern Virginia filthy rich. It's going to be the same thing, and people are just going to become like I said, filthy rich off of just sharing other people's info, stealing it, and selling it to the government.
Even now, I've been reading, the Washington Post has actually covered this a little bit. Cybersecurity, employees, people who have this background, this knowledge that have been coming in and getting jobs, they've been able to sort of drive up the value of what they're worth because there's more of a demand than there is a supply for that. So these people are making exorbitant amounts of money to be able to come and do these jobs. So imagine when there's this entirely new complex, as you call it.
Federal agencies are actually going to colleges right now and trying to recruit hackers so that they'll be doing their dirty work in the next generation. So
very interesting.
So let's see what'll happen.
Yeah, we will.
It may seem like a quiet day in America, but to some, it's the scene of a raging battle invisible to the naked eye.
Well, there is war underway right now on the internet.
This is cyber war. Is the U.S. ready for a full-scale cyber war?
A question asked at the highest levels of the U.S. government, stoked by fears of a new type of WMD.
A weapon of mass disruption.
In a world where
acts of terror could come not only from a few extremists in suicide vests, but from a few keystrokes on the computer.
The FBI warns that those keystrokes could soon be more dangerous to America than terrorism itself.
The cyber threat will equal or surpass the threat from counterterrorism in the foreseeable future.
A future that's got the world's military superpower preparing for the fight ahead.
The next Pearl Harbor that we confront could very well be a cyber attack that cripples our power systems, our grid.
Cyber war, cyber Pearl Harbor. Frightening language for a hypothetical scenario, one that could happen, but hasn't yet.
And some security experts like Jim Harper warn that it never will.
There's no chance whatsoever that nuclear power plants will be hacked, that electric infrastructure will be hacked and taken down for any significant period of time. So the worst we can expect is disruption. That's not war. It doesn't really terrorize. So the threats are serious, but they're not to the level of war or terror.
Yet some of the key leaders in the war on terror are now in the business of cyber war. Michael Chertoff once ran the Department of Homeland Security. He now runs a cybersecurity consulting firm.
You could have a cyber attack that would be as consequential in terms of the economy, and maybe even in terms of loss of life, as things we typically associate with war fighting.
Once America's top spy chief, Mike McConnell now oversees cyber operations for a defense contracting giant.
We're the most vulnerable nation on Earth to a cyber attack.
And anti-terrorism czar Richard Clarke went from advising presidents on cybersecurity to publishing books about the coming cyber war.
For once, it would be nice for the United States to be able to get out in front of a catastrophe, to be able to prevent that catastrophe. We know how to do it. We just need to spend the money.
And the money is flowing. The U.S. government will spend more than $10 billion a year on cybersecurity by 2015, in a worldwide market that's estimated at $80 to $140 billion a year.
The budget that we're releasing today
It's one of the few areas where the White House plans to increase spending despite other defense cuts, and that, some say, is the problem.
It's going to be even more tempting for folks in the the defense contracting community, for example, to hype cyber threats, because that's one of the few streams of money that, sort of still exist.
Forbes magazine contributor Sean Lawson is an expert in cybersecurity.
It's a classic case of an attempt to sort of motivate a response by rallying the troops, by appealing to fear, appealing to uncertainty.
And inside the Beltway, fear and uncertainty can lead to big business and big bucks.
Most people don't understand the problems with computer and data security. Most people in Washington don't understand, and specifically most people in Congress don't understand. Therefore, the quote-unquote Beltway bandits are in a position to create the problem, to state the problem, and offer their own services as a solution.
A battle does rage here, invisible to the naked eye. A war for money, contracts, and power.
We turn now to the hot button issue of cybersecurity in the U.S. A draft of the White House's cybersecurity executive order has been leaked. We've been reporting on the various cybersecurity bills making its way through Congress. Some of them, like SOPA and CISPA, didn't get very far after facing public backlash. But now it looks like the White House is taking matters into its own hands. Internet activists say the leaked executive order is more harsh and vague than some of the controversial legislation that we've seen. So what does this mean for your internet freedoms? To weigh in, Trevor Tim, an activist at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, joins me now. Trevor, welcome. First off, I want to get your reaction to the draft executive order that was leaked.
Well, like you said in the opening, it's very vague. It talks a lot about critical infrastructure and the actual sectors that it's meant to protect, but we don't really know what those critical infrastructure sectors are. They're very broad. We can all agree that electric grids and nuclear power plants and water treatment centers are critical infrastructure, but it also talks about communications. So does that involve like email servers and social networks like Facebook and Twitter? We really have no idea. And it also talks about information sharing, which was the real controversy over CISPA in the Senate's bill, which basically would have carved a giant hole in our privacy laws that would have allowed companies to hand over large swaths of information voluntarily to the government, which they normally would have needed a warrant or a court order. Now, at least with the executive order, the president can't unilaterally change privacy laws. He needs Congress for that. So if there is good news is that we know they're not going to be able to dramatically expand their rights to take information from companies, but it's still something to keep an eye on.
Going along with that, this is an executive order, so should citizens be concerned that the White House is taking unilateral action instead of Congress passing a cybersecurity bill?
Well, I think it's always important when there's an executive order that people read it over closely and make sure that the president isn't overstepping his authority. Here, the problem is it's written very vaguely, so we don't really know what it will accomplish, if anything. The real problem is Republicans are talking about how, there shouldn't be an executive order. But what they're saying is that actually, no, we should have more information sharing. We need a law so companies can give our private information to the government. And that's the opposite of what we want. I think this executive order kind of shows that actually cybersecurity bills aren't even really needed in the first place. The government can go ahead and share any information it wants with companies. And, what they could do with these critical information or these critical infrastructure sectors is just unplug them from the internet. There's no reason that our, water treatment centers and nuclear power plants have to be on the open internet. They can be on a closed network. So I think they're looking for solutions that they don't actually need right now.
So what does this mean for activists that have fought for online privacy and online freedoms? We saw a pretty hard fight to make sure that SOPA didn't get through. I mean, what does it mean for activists like that who have really tried to prevent legislation from going through, and now we have this executive order that kind of bypasses all of that?
Well, luckily the executive order doesn't touch a lot on the information sharing and the privacy law loopholes that we were primarily concerned about. Like I said, the executive branch can't go ahead and do that by themselves. They've even said to the news media, we can't address information sharing like we'd like to. And so that's a good thing. And so at least with the executive order, the worst of the worst parts of these bills, we won't have to worry about coming to fruition.
This is a draft executive order, and with a lot of drafts, we see that they do change. How do you expect this one to evolve?
Well, hopefully it will get more specific. You know, the language in this bill is very vague. Like I said, there's really no definition or the definition of critical infrastructure is so broad it could encompass anything, and they should just be concentrating on the real critical parts of our infrastructure. Like I said before, you know, nuclear power plants and water treatment centers and electric grids. We don't need to include all sorts of communication systems in this. This should be narrowly tailored for the worst sorts of problems that we can face. And as long as they don't touch on information sharing, then we should be okay. But if they even mention it like they do, they should absolutely recognize in the executive order that privacy and civil liberties need to be protected.
Interesting. And Trevor, I do want to bring up another development. This Kaspersky, it's a Russian-based cybersecurity firm, discovered that there are different cyber threats that exist right now that have the same coding as Flame. If you can recall, Flame was a state-sponsored. It was found to be a state-sponsored virus. So all the signs point to the attacks being state-sponsored. With this development, Trevor, does this provide justification that there is a need to regulate the internet?
I mean, I think regulate's the wrong word. Obviously, many nations are developing cyber weapons capabilities, and we definitely should, as a government or any country, want to protect our own systems. And the thing is, the government can do that without affecting privacy law. You know, they can beef up the security on their networks without having to get information or our personal information from private companies. And, you know, there's also been former FBI officials and NSA officials commenting that we need more offensive capabilities to actually hack more, and that's going to somehow, you know, solve our cybersecurity problem, where they would be able to reach into other servers and delete information or encrypt information that they claim is stolen. So, you know, I think the cybersecurity debate is kind of morphed into this monster where, you know, the government is trying to ask for all these powers that they don't really need, and that the simple solutions are already here and they can be implemented really easily.
So yeah, the White House is saying that cybersecurity is very serious risks, poses risks, as you pointed out before. They're saying it poses risks to infrastructure, transportation, communication, all these things. And they're almost saying that this is a last resort in order to protect the U.S. From cyber threats. They are portraying us as being vulnerable to these threats. But you're saying that this is not necessary.
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, especially the information sharing from private companies to the government. I mean, Facebook originally supported CISPA, and then when they were criticized, they said, you know, we don't need this provision. That's not why we supported this bill, and we won't use it if necessary. The government can share as much information with companies as they want. The executive branch is the one that controls the classification system. So if they want to hand classified information to companies, that's fine. They don't need a law for that. And the same thing goes with critical infrastructure. If they just unplug these things from the open networks, then that would go a long way to solve the problem. So hopefully we're going to see that type of solution rather than this sort of grand, you know, carve loopholes into every privacy law solution.
I want to speak about the really urgent need for the Senate to adopt cybersecurity legislation. And I begin by recalling a recent story in the Washington Post that detailed how a young man living an ocean away from us was able to use his computer to hack into the cyber control system of a local water utility here in the United States. It took him just 10 minutes and required no special tools or no special training. While the hacker could have taken over the water company's operations and caused real damage, instead he posted screenshots of his hack on the internet to show that he had been there and prove his point that our nation's internet security is woefully lax. And it took very little in the way of resources or skill to penetrate it. Mr. President, this kind of story is but one piece of what I would call an avalanche of evidence showing that there is an urgent need to pass comprehensive cybersecurity legislation that will safeguard our critical cyber infrastructure. The fact is, as this 22-year-old's activities showed, and as authorities in the area, such as Admiral Mike McConnell, the former director of national intelligence, has said, that cyber structure, which is owned by private entities, is simply not adequately defended. And when it's not adequately defended, and here I'm talking about vital national systems, the electric power grid, water companies, transportation systems, pipelines, et cetera, when those are not, the cyber systems that control them now are not adequately protected, it means our nation is not adequately protected, because a cyber attack can incapacitate vital national entities that we all depend on every day, and in fact cause enormous harm and loss of life, as much as a conventional attack by air in earlier confrontations and conflicts. Yesterday, the majority leader came to the floor of the Senate and spoke, I thought, eloquently about the urgency of the Senate adopting cybersecurity legislation. I wanted to come to the floor today to thank Senator Reid for that statement, and to say, as chairman of the Senate Homeland Security Committee, how strongly I agree with him. And of course, we're not alone. A few days ago, 6 of our nation's most experienced national security leaders, spanning the last 2+ administrations, transcending any lines of partisanship, wrote a letter to Senator Reid urging him to bring up the cybersecurity legislation as soon as possible. And that's a quote, as soon as possible. In that letter to both, not just Senator Reid, but to Senator McConnell, the Republican leader as well, former Department of Homeland Security Secretary Mike Chertoff from the Bush administration, former Director of National Intelligence, Admiral Mike McConnell, I referred to, began in the Bush administration, former Deputy Defense Secretary Paul Wolfowitz, also from the previous administration, former NSA and CIA Director Mike Hayden, also from the previous administration, Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General James Cartwright, and former Defense Secretary, Deputy Defense Secretary Bill Lynn, sent this letter. Incidentally, to say what is already a matter of public record, in doing so, they express opinions that are quite similar to what we've heard from all the leaders of the current administration when it comes to security. Secretary of Defense Panetta, the Director of National Intelligence Clapper, the Director of the CIA, Petraeus, and so on, and of course Secretary Napolitano of the Department of Homeland Security. I want to read from this letter from these national security leaders, because it really sums up where we are. And I quote now, "Given the time left in this legislative session and the upcoming election this fall, we are concerned that the window of opportunity to pass legislation that is, in our view, critically necessary to protect our national and economic security is quickly disappearing." And these, in the letter, they went on to say, and I quote again, "We, the signers of the letter, carry the burden of knowing, along with a lot of the rest of us, that 9/11 might have been averted with the intelligence that existed at the time. We do not want to be in the same position again when cyber 9/11 hits. It is not a question of whether this will happen, it is a question of when."
Tomorrow, a full committee hearing on cybersecurity. And this comes within our purview on this committee. And I mean, not trying to be dramatic about it, when the internet was invented, everybody fell flat in their face. They were so thrilled. And the world began to do business in a different way. Now, both the President Bush's Director of National Intelligence, Mike McConnell, who I greatly respect, and President Obama's Director of National Intelligence, Admiral Blair, who I greatly respect, have labeled cybersecurity perpetrated through the internet as the #1 national hazard of attack on the homeland in West Virginia, in America, or anywhere else. So, I mean, it really almost makes you ask the question, would it have been better if we'd never invented the internet and had to use paper and pencil or whatever? And that's a stupid thing to say, but it has genuine consequence, because it's on the internet that these acts of shutting down, they have the television saying that, ads every day saying that the Department of Defense is attacked 3 million times a day, and it's true. Everybody is attacked. Anybody can do it. People say, well, it's China and Russia, but there could be, some kid in Latvia doing the same thing. I mean, it's an individual act. It doesn't require a sleeper cell. It doesn't require any, ammonia or explosives. It's just an act. And yet it's an act which can shut this country down. Shut down its electricity system, its banking system, shut down really anything that we have to offer. It is an awesome problem. On the Intelligence Committee, we were taken for a full day to discuss, to a undisclosed place in Virginia to discuss this. It is a fearsome, awesome problem, to speak. I mean, obviously it's broader than that too. I wonder where this stands with you, what your thoughts are, and what you think we ought to be doing about it.
Senator, cybersecurity is obviously of utmost importance.
Interesting, Jay Rockefeller says the internet never should have existed. It would be better if people still wrote things down with pencils and paper. They're coming after the internet because they fear the power the internet has. They fear the free flow of information because information is power. The why of things, understanding the causality of things, is the power. One of the major things that separates them from us is the fact that they have access to information that we do not. And that's why they are afraid, because the controllers, the powers that shouldn't be, are only in control because they have access to information and that we as humanity do not. They fear an evolution. They fear you. That's what all of this is for. That's why they need FEMA camps. That's why they need martial law. That's why they need internet regulations. They need all of this because at the end of the day, they fear you and they fear your evolution, your enlightenment, your evolution of humanity. They fear that because once that happens, their control structure and their power is gone and they will become irrelevant. And their way of life will forever change. You all have the true power, ladies and gentlemen. It's time to stand up and take it back. I'll leave you all on this note. Like the late, great Jimi Hendrix said, when the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace. No fear, only love, ladies and gentlemen. We will get through this.